Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, August 11th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will reach a high of 90.8 degrees Fahrenheit, with the low settling at 71.3 degrees. It's definitely a day to stay cool and mindful of the heat. Later in the show, we will look at Donald Trump's proposed strategies for bringing an end to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, exploring what his plan entails. Plus, we'll examine the judicial decision that recently blocked a Trump administration order concerning fishing within a protected marine monument. Why was this specific order halted, and what are the implications? We'll have the details. All these stories and more are coming up on Alex's News. Stick around. Welcome back. We begin our news today with a highly anticipated diplomatic event on the horizon, as U.S. President Donald Trump is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. For more on this, we turn to our national affairs reporter, Ethan. Ethan, give us the lowdown on this significant summit.
Grace, it is indeed a meeting making waves across the globe. U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are scheduled to meet this Friday, August 15th, in Alaska, just 4 days from now. This marks the first in-person meeting between a U.S. and Russian leader since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, and the first direct encounter between Trump and Putin since 2019, according to reporting from NPR and CBS News.
A lot of history there, Ethan. What led to this particular meeting? I know President Trump has been quite vocal about the situation in Ukraine.
He certainly has, Grace. President Trump had previously expressed considerable frustration with Russia's recent drone and missile attacks on Ukraine. He even set an August 8th deadline for Russia to agree to an immediate ceasefire or face more severe U.S. sanctions, as CBS News and BBC News have reported. While that self-imposed deadline passed without a formal ceasefire, the tide appeared to turn following what were described as, quote, highly productive, end quote, talks between Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Putin in Moscow.
Steve Witkoff is a name we've heard before. Can you elaborate on his role and those talks?
Absolutely, Grace. Steve Witkoff, who also serves as the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, has effectively been acting as Trump's de facto envoy to Russia. This recent meeting in Moscow on August 6th was his fifth trip in this capacity. President Trump described their 3-hour discussion as yielding, quote, great progress, end quote, according to the Claude Sonnet 4 response via Gemini Flash.
And what exactly came out of those extensive discussions? Was there a specific ceasefire plan on the table?
From those talks, Witkoff reportedly presented a ceasefire plan to European officials. Some reports, citing the Wall Street Journal, suggested this plan might involve Russia withdrawing from the southern regions of Zaporizhia and Kherson in exchange for full control of Donetsk Oblast. Other interpretations included a freeze on the front lines or Ukraine withdrawing from Donetsk for a ceasefire. However, a German news outlet BILD reported that Witkoff may have, quote, misunderstood, end quote, Putin's statements, potentially mistaking a Russian demand for Ukrainian withdrawal as an offer for Russian forces to withdraw, with Russian demands reportedly still including full control of Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions. It seems Putin's openness for this summit is a direct result of Witkoff's visit.
Fascinating. So we have the White House confirming it. What about Russia and NATO? And where in Alaska will this meeting take place?
Both the Kremlin and NATO sources have confirmed the summit. Russian presidential aide Yuri Ushakov stated a meeting is set for August 15th in, quote, the great state of Alaska, end quote, according to the Claude Sonnet 4 response via Gemini Flash. While the White House hasn't given explicit U.S. State Department confirmation, they've acknowledged planning is underway. Vice President J.D. Vance has also met with European and Ukrainian officials to discuss the upcoming talks. As for the location within Alaska, the exact spot hasn't been publicly disclosed, but some reports hint at the Alyeska Resort in Girdwood having its booking calendar blacked out for August 12th to 16th, as revealed by a local outlet, citing a source familiar with the planning.
Alaska, of all places, is an interesting choice. It carries significant historical weight, given it was a former Russian territory purchased by the U.S. in 1867. What kind of symbolism is attached to this venue by both sides?
That's where it gets really intriguing, Grace. The choice of Alaska is certainly more than just a place to hang your hat. While some U.S. and NATO sources frame it as President Trump demonstrating strength by bringing Putin to American soil, Russian commentators and analysts view the location as a, quote, perceived coup, end quote, for Vladimir Putin, according to NPR. This perspective strategically reinforces the Russian narrative that national borders are malleable and subject to change. Russian officials like Kirill Dmitriev have highlighted Alaska's, quote, symbolic significance, end quote, as, quote, Russian America, end quote. He mentions its, quote, Orthodox roots, forts, and fur trade, end quote, suggesting it, quote, makes the U.S. an Arctic nation, end quote, echoing historical ties, as reported by Gemini Flash. Konstantin Malafeyev, a sanctioned billionaire, has claimed Alaskans, quote, respectfully remember their Russian past and their Orthodox present, end quote, while pro-Kremlin war correspondent Alexander Kotz suggested the meeting, quote, has every chance to become historic, end quote, again, according to Gemini Flash.
So it's not just about what they talk about, but where they talk about it.
Precisely. Western analysts like Sam Green, a professor of Russian politics at King's College London, noted the symbolism of holding the summit in Alaska is, quote, horrendous, as though designed to demonstrate that borders can change, land can be bought and sold, end quote, adding that, quote, mainstream Russian discourse maintains a claim that Alaska should be returned to Russia, end quote, as reported by Gemini Flash. Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia, questioned whether Trump recognized that, quote, Russian nationalists claim that losing Alaska, like Ukraine, was a raw deal for Moscow that needs to be corrected, end quote, as Gemini Flash has uncovered. Sergei Radchenko, a professor at Johns Hopkins, even suggested Putin might use the one-on-one discussion to deliver lengthy historical accounts, potentially asserting that Alaska was, quote, unfairly taken away, end quote, from Russia. For Russia, this setting on American territory is seen as a, quote, diplomatic triumph, end quote, for Putin, granting him a degree of, quote, legitimacy, end quote, without apparent concessions regarding the war in Ukraine. It marks the first time a Russian leader has been invited to American soil outside of the United Nations since 2007.
Quite the chess game. What about the meeting's format and President Trump's stated goals? Is Ukraine involved in these initial talks?
Currently, the meeting remains bilateral, as Putin reportedly requested. However, President Trump is still willing to convene a trilateral meeting, including Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at a later date. Trump has expressed his belief that both Putin and Zelensky desire, quote, peace, end quote, according to CBS News, and claims a deal, quote, to stop the killing, end quote, is, quote, very close, end quote, as BBC News has reported. As a candidate, Trump had pledged to end the war within 24 hours of taking office and has repeatedly claimed it, quote, never would have happened, end quote, if he had been president.
What has been the reaction from NATO and Ukraine to these developments?
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte believes Trump will be, quote, testing, end quote, Putin in their Friday meeting to assess his seriousness regarding a ceasefire deal, as CBS News has indicated. Rutte lauded Trump for a, quote, great NATO summit, end quote, in The Hague this past June, securing commitments for member states to raise defense spending to 5% of their GDP annually by 2035. This is a substantial increase from the alliance's long-standing guideline of 2% of GDP. Rutte also credited Trump for, quote, breaking the deadlock, end quote, by initiating dialogue with Putin, allowing U.S. weapons to be delivered to Ukraine, which, quote, opened the floodgates, end quote, and praised planned secondary sanctions on major buyers of Russian oil and gas, including India. He emphasized that Ukraine, quote, will have to be and will be involved, end quote, in discussions about territory, security guarantees, and peace talks, despite being excluded from this initial bilateral meeting. Rutte confirmed NATO-coordinated weapons deliveries would continue regardless of the summit's outcome to ensure Ukraine can stay in the fight. He stressed that if Putin is serious, the process will continue with Ukraine and European involvement, but if not, it will stop there, maintaining that Russia's control over Ukrainian territory can never be accepted, quote, in a legal sense, end quote, though negotiations might address the, quote, factual situation, end quote.
It sounds like a complex negotiation process. And from Ukraine's perspective,
Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S., Oksana Markarova, expressed on, quote, Face the Nation, end quote, that, quote, all Ukraine prays for President Trump to be effective and to have great results, end quote, and hopes his push and sanctions will convince Putin to stop aggression, according to CBS News. She did not criticize the bilateral format, acknowledging, quote, sometimes diplomacy requires different formats, end quote, and confirmed Zelensky is willing to participate in future meetings. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that any agreements without Kyiv's input will be, quote, dead decisions, end quote, and that Ukraine will not reward Russia with territory, as reported by BBC News.
so what kind of deal might emerge, and what are the main points of contention?
President Trump has indicated any deal will likely involve, quote, some swapping of territories, end quote, specifically allowing Russia to keep Crimea and the Donbas region, which includes Donetsk and Luhansk, but giving up Kherson and Zaporizhia, according to CBS News and BBC News. This is a significant point of contention, as Ukraine staunchly rejects ceding territory. Both the U.S. and Russia express a desire for the war to end, but their demands diverge significantly, with Ukraine adamant about not ceding seized regions and Russia firm on territorial control, Ukraine's neutrality, and the future size of its army.
And what about the criticism surrounding this meeting, especially given the ongoing conflict?
There has certainly been criticism, Grace. Senator Mark Kelly, an Arizona Democrat, called Putin a, quote, war criminal, end quote, and stated that allowing him to fly into the U.S. to negotiate, quote, is not a show of strength, end quote, believing the administration, quote, should have extracted something for this visit, end quote, as CBS News reported. It seems not everyone is on the same page about this diplomatic approach.
Thank you, Ethan, for shedding light on this crucial upcoming summit. We'll be watching closely as events unfold.
My pleasure, Grace.
That was our first story of the day. Coming up next, we delve into local news. Welcome back. We're casting our net wide this morning for a fascinating story out of the Pacific, where a major victory for marine conservation has just been reeled in. For more on this, we turn to our reporter, Chloe, who has been fishing for answers on this complex issue. Chloe, tell us about this significant ruling concerning the Pacific Islands Heritage Marine National Monument.
Grace, it's certainly a monumental decision, if you'll pardon the pun. As of today, August 11th, 2025, commercial fishing has once again been halted in the vast Pacific Islands Heritage Marine National Monument. This comes after a U.S. district judge blocked a Trump administration executive order that had temporarily allowed fishing to resume, a ruling that Access WDUN reports represents a major victory for environmental groups and marine conservation efforts.
That sounds like a big win. For those unfamiliar, what exactly is this monument and why is it so important?
Well, Grace, as Aruba Today tells us, it's an expansive and critically important protected area in the remote central Pacific Ocean, southwest of Hawaii. It spans approximately 500,000 square miles. Established by President George W. Bush in 2009 and expanded by President Barack Obama in 2014, according to Aruba Today and FWS.gov, it's renowned for archaeological treasures, diverse marine life, seabirds, and extensive coral reefs, serving as a vital habitat.
So a long-standing protected area. What prompted the Trump administration to try reopening it for fishing, and what was the immediate impact?
According to Aruba Today, in April of this year, then-President Donald Trump issued an executive order to permit commercial fishing in portions. This aimed to boost the U.S. commercial fishing industry, aligning with his stated goal to be, and I quote, the world's dominant seafood leader, end quote. The National Marine Fisheries Service, or NMFS, quickly authorized industrial longline fishing, which uses baited hooks on lines extending 60 miles or longer. This resumed within days. Environmental groups, as reported by Aruba Today and Yahoo.com, immediately voiced strong concerns about accidental bycatch endangering vulnerable marine life.
And those concerns led to legal action. Can you walk us through the lawsuit and the judge's recent ruling?
Absolutely, Grace. In response, environmental organizations including Earth Justice and the Center for Biological Diversity filed a lawsuit in May 2025, as detailed by earthjustice.org. Their argument, according to hawaiipublicradio.org, was that the executive order and NMFS letter unlawfully altered regulations without required public comment processes. Native Hawaiian plaintiffs also contended it would harm their cultural and spiritual interests. On Friday, August 8, 2025, just 3 days ago, U.S. District Judge Micah W.J. Smith, presiding in Hawaii, sided with the environmentalists. CourthouseNews.com reports Judge Smith declared the NMFS April letter unlawful and canceled its effect. The ruling mandates commercial fishing vessels immediately cease operations in waters between 50 and 200 nautical miles around Johnston Atoll, Jarvis Island, and Wake Island, as reported by Yahoo.com. An Earth Justice attorney emphasized the government must now undergo a proper process.
This sounds like a significant hurdle for the fishing industry. What are the economic implications of this reversal for Hawaii's longline fleet?
It's a complex issue. The Hawaii longline fleet generates approximately $100 million annually, primarily from tuna, according to Yahoo.com. Industry figures previously argued prohibitions adversely affected them. However, according to ScienceDaily.com, scientific evidence challenges that premise. A 2020 study in Nature Communications, led by John Linham from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, found the monument's expansion did not cause overall economic harm to the Hawaii-based longline tuna fleet. It found an increase in catch per unit effort. This is due to the, quote, spillover effect, where protected fish populations grow and enhance catch rates in adjacent waters. A 2024 study, according to strongcoast.org, even indicated that large-scale marine protected areas can lead to a 12 to 18% increase in catch per unit of fishing effort. Studies show fish biomass inside no-take marine reserves to be, on average, 670% greater than in similar unprotected areas, according to marineconservation.org.
That's a fascinating counterpoint. So what are the next steps in this legal battle? Is this the final word?
Not by a long shot, Grace. While Judge Smith's ruling immediately halts fishing, the NMFS is now mandated to initiate a new, formal rulemaking process if they intend to allow fishing. However, according to CourthouseNews.com, the environmental group's lawsuit involves a broader constitutional challenge to the legality of President Trump's April 2025 proclamation itself. This challenge is scheduled for an October 6, 2025 scheduling conference in Judge Smith's court in Hawaii. That's just 56 days from today, August 11, 2025. EarthJustice.org contends President Trump exceeded his authority under the Antiquities Act of 1906. The Department of Justice, in a June 2025 opinion, has asserted the president does possess this authority, reversing a 1938 legal opinion as reported by BloombergLaw.com. Appeals to higher courts are highly probable given the substantial constitutional questions at stake, according to hawaiipublicradio.org.
It sounds like this legal tug-of-war is far from over. Chloe, thank you for breaking down this monumental story for us and for shedding light on the issues at play. Here's some other headlines. Good morning. We begin in northwestern Turkey, where a powerful 6.1 magnitude earthquake has left the province of Balıkesir on shaky ground. The tremor struck Sunday evening near the town of Sindirgi, causing a truly shaking situation that was felt as far away as Istanbul. Tragically, an 81-year-old individual died after being pulled from the rubble of a collapsed building. At least 29 others were injured. In total, 16 buildings, most of them reportedly derelict, crumbled under the force of the quake. The seismic event also toppled 2 mosque minarets in the region. Rescue teams worked through the night, at times calling for complete silence to listen for signs of life, successfully pulling 4 people from a single collapsed structure. President Erdogan has wished a speedy recovery to all those affected in a country all too familiar with the devastating power of its major fault lines. In Iraq, the Prime Minister is cracking down on paramilitary commanders after a deadly clash in Baghdad. The move comes after armed members of the Kataib Hezbollah militia, a state-sanctioned group, stormed an agricultural directorate last month to protest the firing of its former head. The ensuing gun battle with police left 3 people dead, including an officer and a taxi driver. Now, Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani has ordered the removal of the commanders of the 2 brigades involved. In a clear message that the state will not tolerate such actions, the government is referring all involved to the judiciary, stating there are structural failings within the paramilitary forces. It seems this prime minister is not mobilizing for any excuses, aiming to reassert state authority over these powerful, Iran-backed factions. And in a major diplomatic development, Armenia and Azerbaijan have signed a U.S.-brokered agreement aimed at normalizing relations. The deal, signed at the White House with President Trump mediating, is being hailed as a historic step. A key provision is the creation of a new transit corridor through Armenia, connecting Azerbaijan to its exclave of Nakhchivan. It's been dubbed the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, with the U.S. securing exclusive management rights for 99 years. The deal has been met with cautious optimism. In Azerbaijan, there's hope for economic benefits, while in Armenia, many remain wary, pointing to a lack of detail and deep-seated mistrust. Crucially, the final status of the long-disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region remains unresolved, meaning this new route could either pave the way for lasting peace or hit a dead end down the road. Finally, to Haiti, where the government has declared a 3-month state of emergency for its central region. The area, known as Haiti's rice basket, is facing a bitter harvest of violence as armed gangs systematically terrorize farming communities. This has triggered a severe food crisis in the already struggling nation. According to the UN, gang violence in the region has killed more than 1,000 people and displaced over 239,000 since last fall. In response, the government has appointed a new interim police chief, Andrei Jonas Vladimir Perazan, who is tasked with restoring security and working with an incoming UN-backed multinational mission. The state of emergency is a desperate bid to regain control from the gangs who have sown chaos across the nation's agricultural heartland. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.